Piggy. Ah! You don't say.
Hi, I'm FDRawr. I stream myself losing at video games with friends, family, and sometimes even strangers live on Twitch. I also take a little bit of time out each week to work on YouTube videos about subjects I care way too much about. This is one such occasion. Today I'd like to talk about BHVR Interactive, the infamous game studio behind the beloved Dead by Daylight title, and how they narrowly avoided an approaching power creep, the likes of which helped bury predecessors such as Evolve. How much mileage can we get out of one game's failure? But to do that, we're gonna need a time machine. Like this one, which I have designed for just such an occasion. Now we just need some time traveling gear and voila! Now let's go back in time and talk about Dead by Daylight and the power creep they just narrowly avoided. I know you never get this request, Time Machine Regine, but I want to go back to 2016.
You sure you want to go to 2016? You know all the stuff that happens then, right?
I know. It's for a project, I promise. Let's go.
2016, here we come.
Beep 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 boop boop.
Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical horror-themed cat and mouse game released in 2016 by BHVR Interactive, a video game studio in Canada or something. The game has stood head and shoulders above any and all attempts at an alternate game in this genre. Some of the most notable examples are games like Back 4 Blood, the Evil Dead game, and Video Horror Society. We will not be discussing those titles much today, but it's important to note that when compared to Dead by Daylight, each of these titles would be considered a massive failure. Somehow, DBD has shielded itself from almost every downfall it's faced, and in the wake of a giant industry change and model from games as a product to games as a service, was uniquely positioned for full advantage of the new market landscape. But this video isn't about their expert marketing, it's about their game design. So to talk about that, we have to get a few things out of the way. So, FDRawr can travel time, fight Big Pharma, and lose in a match of Overwatch all at the same time. But can he tell us what power creep is? I sure can. Power creep is a phenomenon relatively exclusive to the video games as a service model, with a few exceptions like the Pokemon franchise. The basics of it are that as content accumulates, new characters are released, new weapons show up, new abilities. The older and more established characters' abilities and items become useless as new content is going to be purposefully balanced to have an impact when it's released. Nobody wants to work on a new perk, creating the rules and physics and limitations of it only for it to be buried upon release. The most prime example I can think of power creep in pop culture would be Dragon Ball Z. Maybe you've heard of that show. The series follows Goku, a super-powered alien sent from another planet, and his battles to save the world from other invading forces, to include other people from his home planet, as well as organic and inorganic threats that seem to just pop up left and right. In the first section of the show, Goku mainly fights other people from his home planet, known as Saiyans, which is a pretty one-for-one fight, Saiyan versus Saiyan and so on. The next major event involves an evil galactic emperor named Frieza who seeks to destroy the Saiyans' home planet and commit a big bad on the Saiyan race. A secret, more powerful form of Saiyan is discovered when Frieza comes to Earth to end Goku,
the Super Saiyan,
which is just an elevated and all-around more powerful form of Saiyan. This arc is amazing, and as a child, it got me to sit there and watch 8 episodes straight of Goku just holding his arms above his head charging his spirit bomb. I was hooked. As the series went on though, becoming Super Saiyan became an almost casual occurrence, and subsequently new levels of it were introduced to recreate the intensity of that first blast into Super Saiyan. Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, Super Saiyan 4, Super Saiyan 4 Fusion,
Super Saiyan God.
You see what I'm getting at here? After watching Goku get utterly destroyed in his multiple Super Saiyan forms only to go Super Saiyan God to defeat an enemy, it kinda cheapens the threat that Frieza posed in the first place, since he got beat simply by a Super Saiyan 1 level character. This is power creep. The new content cheapens and weakens the old content, rendering it kinda useless. The same thing happens in video games, such as a constant release of new Pokemon making old legendary characters like Moltres or Mewtwo almost useless in the modern meta. As video games transitioned from a finished product to a constantly ongoing service, this problem came to the forefront in most titles. It'd be dishonest to say that Dead by Daylight has an innate immunity to power creep, because they certainly don't. Since 2016, BHVR Interactive have released around 30 large patches every single year to keep their game in line. And even with such work ethic, the line between what is possible with a perk or an ability and what is likely to happen in-game is almost always blurry. Since at least 2017, Dead by Daylight has had a reputation for being an incredibly survivor-sided game, and for good reason. During some of the darker days in DBD history, the developers had a bad habit of using new perks to balance out flaws with old perks or playstyles. Being tunneled, which is where the person playing the killer role in DBD chooses to target one individual in an attempt to make the game into a 3 versus 1 as opposed to a 4 versus 1 competition, sucks. But you know what else sucked? People being able to decisive strike right off your shoulder on your first downing of a player. You know what sucked worse? 4 players bringing decisive strike. Here we can see a prime example of power creep festering inside our precious Debbie Delight. And honestly, it would stay that way for a few years. This is far from the only example of DBD's horrendous lopsidedness. From head to toe, it was very obvious that this game and the developers were very aware that retaining 4 survivors as players outweighs retaining 1 killer. This arguably created a rift in the culture forming around this game and the genre. Opinions could be easily dismissed as coming from a survivor main standpoint or killer main frame of mind. And I'll be honest, to this day, we're still not free of it. So what's the solution? This is a video about how BHVR avoided power creep, but we've seen historically that they've had massive amounts of power creep, rupturing their growing community from the start. Get to the point, dude. Okay, so in my opinion, and this is absolutely not me claiming a fact here, BHVR seems to have implemented a sort of killer-sided approach to their game. That is to say, the developers seem to perk their ears just a little bit more to the woes of the killer side than to the survivor side. And in my opinion, from the years 2018 to 2020, this approach significantly improved the game. I've made it no secret as a survivor main, I greatly resented watching decisive strike, borrowed time, almost all exhaustion perks, flashlights, maps, and everything under the sun get nerfed to ground zero. And when balance is being applied, those who the balance previously favored will feel robbed, and that's just a truth of reality. Liberating people makes the former master feel oppressed. Professor of Psychological Science Dr. Paul Piff once performed, alongside a team of researchers of course, an experiment on in-game advantage and its effect on people. People were randomly decided by coin flip to be rich or poor in a game of Monopoly, so one player got extreme advantages while the other did not. These games were wildly rigged and secret cameras were installed to monitor what happened. Noticeably, Dr. Piff observes, the advantage players became more boisterous, more obnoxious, some would say more toxic over time. And while they did notice the advantage they had early on, they seemed less aware of their advantages when asked of their view of how they won a rigged game. In general, our brains will try to justify any advantage we're given. It's in our nature, and nobody wants to admit when they're the person who needs the nerf. It led to me becoming bitter watching all my favorite perks in DBD get destroyed while that pesky Noed remained virtually untouched, even buffed at one point.
We don't need to talk about this again.
You're right, because we live on this side of the timeline. Or maybe my setup muddied that a little bit, huh? The point is, Dead by Daylight and the developers at BHVR managed to push right through the kicking and screaming of pink-haired survivor mains because they knew ultimately we'd be fine. And those of us who wouldn't were probably not there with great intentions anyway. Dead by Daylight has shown a kind of restraint that made them almost mockable during their longest running exodus of players to those of us chasing greener pastures with certain game studios that were hell-bent on pleasing the more vocal ex-killer mains. And I think that's great. Okay, Time Machine Regine, I'm ready to go back. Time Machine Regine?
I think we've screwed up.
Too long.
I always loved you, FDRawr.
Oh no! Flash forward to 2023, and in the last year or so, we've seen a massive overhaul of a large amount of perks, systematic reworks of old characters to help them fit in the current meta, map changes, and for the first time in a long time, a transparent roadmap. 7 years in, and behavior hasn't lost their ability to catch their stride. We won't talk about how they behaved during the pandemic, and is still able to defend its position as titan of the industry, and I think that's pretty cool, even if I do wish they had more serious competition. Anyways, that's kind of power creep and how behavior managed to avoid it, despite it being baked directly into their formula from the start. I'm sure I don't have to encourage you to leave comments telling me what I got wrong, but while you're there, be sure to like and subscribe for more of this kind of content. And be sure to check me out over on Twitch where I stream this kind of stuff live. I hope to see you in the fog. Have a great day.